Honestly, I didn't know who Fellini was. So I walked into his office, and he looks at me, and he says, Gira di la. Turn around, and that aggravated me. I went, you want to see my teeth? And I pulled up the bell-bottom flare pants and said, you want to see my legs? Helping him out, but I was being really ironic with him. He looked at Liliana Betty, who, if I remember right, she had a cigar. And they were like, she was just like that with her cigar, and they were looking at me. And he said, questo ragazzo è elegante e particolare. He's elegant and particular. I didn't understand that he was relating to me as himself when he had arrived in Rome. And he just looked at me and he said, you're hired. You come back in 2 weeks. I really knew very little about the American film industry. I knew film because I would go watch European films. You have to understand too that Texas, it had its beauty, but it was horrible. You know, like it was really rough. There was a lot of racism. When I said I wanted to be an actor, people would laugh. Mexican Americans can't be actors, you know, like you're not gonna do it. My first film, Viva Max in San Antonio, I wound up cast by Jerry Paris himself. And I went to El Tropicana Hotel in San Antonio from college with a beautiful girl that was going to audition for him. And she was just gorgeous. When I walked into the hotel room with her for the audition, everyone was in the room, you know, and you'd go around the beds and into the chairs and sit down in front of the camera. But I didn't think I was going to audition, and all of a sudden I heard, that face! And I went, oh, look at me. And he said, yes, that face. Are you going to audition? And of course I was. He stopped and he said something very important. In this business, always be yourself. All of a sudden, I just started being myself there, and I was cast. I think I was more used to exploit San Antonio and take a local kid that was, you know, nobody, and get a lot of publicity, which I did. I mean, I was front page everywhere. So that was my beginning, and Viva Max was like the last of that series of It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, where every star in Hollywood was in that movie. Alice Ghostly, Keenan Wynn. I mean, I got to work with Peter Ustinov and Pamela Tiffin. So there I was in Italy working on Viva Max, and it was a whole different world for me, and that I was playing on the Fellini set when it was empty. I had stayed in Italy and lived there a year after Viva Max and all that crew left. And after Jerry Paris said, come back to LA with me and I'll put you under contract. But I didn't want to go under contract to LA. I just hadn't had my fill of Italy yet because I was discovering what my European DNA was, you know, that part of me, and the difference of how we were treated here and how it was treated there. Film stopped in Italy. There was what they said a sciopero, which was strikes, and the film industry crashed, and they went from 67 films to nothing. And there I was, you know, living off of the money that I had kept for myself to live there. And I got a phone call from my Roman agent after about a year, and he said, there's a movie being cast in Rome that we think you would really be good for. I was supposed to go back, and they were sending me a ticket to go back to Rome and audition for Franco Zeffirelli. And he was doing Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. He had had a big hit, which was Romeo and Juliet. I thought, well, I'll go. And my friend said, I have a phone number. You call this number and go to lunch with Eugene Walter. And, you know, he writes music. So I got to Cinecittà and I went in and I sat in a room and I was sitting there waiting to meet Franco Zeffirelli. And he walked in the room and he walked out. He didn't even say hello. And I remembered that number. So I just picked up the phone and said, I'm leaving this evening, Mr. Walter, but maybe I can have lunch with you. My dear mutual friend with you said that I should call you. He says, oh, come right over. You know, he had a southern life in Rome and he knew everyone. Well, it turns out that Eugene Walter would translate most of what was going on in Italy into English, and most of what was going on in English in movie scripts into Italian. So he knew everyone and everything that was going on in Italy. At lunch, he said, Peter, I think I'm going to make a couple of phone calls for you. So he called Liliana Cavani. He said, I have this young man for this movie that you're casting that I think would be perfect as Goulot and Pelias in the areas that are going to be Pelias and Milizans. And so she said she'd think about it. And then he picked up the phone and he said, Mr. Fellini, I have a young man that I think should be who you're looking for. And he had their scripts there. And so Federico said, oh, send him over tomorrow. Send him over tomorrow. So then he picked up the phone and he said, Miss Cavani, Mr. Fellini is very interested in this young man. I mean, this man went all the way to do all of this over lunch. And so she says, oh, I have to have him. I have to have him. Here I am, you know, this Chicano kid from South Texas, from a little town where horses still wander around the streets. But, you know, I was a big Italian movie star and a London model and all of these things. So obviously I was changed. I got to Cinecittà the next day. I, delayed my flight. And there was a line, like a block-long double line of young men waiting to get into the studio. I just went around all of them, and I just knocked on these. I remember them as being wooden doors. The little door opened, and it was this woman, and Liliana Betty. And I said, I'm here, and I'm supposed to meet Federico Fellini. And she looked, and I said, Eugenio Walter sent me. And so she said, oh, Eugenio, Peter, sei tu. It's you, Peter. So, I mean, the gates to Roma and to Italian film opened, and the doors opened, and I was in front of this desk, and there was Mr. Fellini. So I went up to Fellini and I said, well, I also committed to Liliana Cavani. And so, e tu, che cosa vuoi fare? Ma voglio fare ogni due. Voglio fare ogni due. It's been 40 years since I spoke Italian, but I want to do both, And he said, so you want to go? Okay, you have 15 days. So that was good. I mean, not everybody gets a 40-week contract with 2 weeks to go work on another movie. So Italy had no movies made for about 2 years because they were in a crisis. And then I was supposed to star in both of the movies that were pulling it out of the crisis. Working with Fellini on a set was like going into a city because, he had like 5 or 6 sets. Fellini didn't believe in scripts. And he would just like mimeograph sheets of his ideas and staple them together, and they were for the next day. Federico Fellini was this man that had an image in his head, his angels, his genius. would show him what was supposed to be in the film. And so everything, no matter how extravagant or how ordinary it is, he's watching it in his head. He doesn't need a script. He says, I need 50 pine trees. And then if they deliver 49 and he goes to the set, where's the 50th tree?
Fellini examines the fall of the Roman Empire, 1931 to 1972.
That's what gets me about the script writing for LA. If you don't have the lead line, and if you don't have, like by page 10, something written that's going to grab the formula, and it's all very formula driven and within the box. But Fellini just would mimeograph it and he'd say, è per le produttori. It's for to show the producers something, you know? And that's how he did his movies. And so that's very creative, genius actually. Well, honestly, unless you're a Latino in the United States, you don't get Fellini. You know, unless you're a Latino or of Italian descent, if you have Latin blood in you, you understand how Fellini and life in Italy and life for Latinos is magical realism. There's nothing made up about it. It's a documentary showing exactly how it is. And Americans might not get that because our lifestyles are so different. This is the end of a cycle that I've lived here in San Antonio. And I opened up this studio as a little open to the public shop because I had pulled away from the San Antonio community into my private life while my daughters were young. And I came back in and opened up this shop as a way to introduce myself back to my artist friends. And so their original artwork would show here. And I called it Mexi Moxie. I used to have, I worked for Valentino in Italia Vogue, and I had those.
Growing up, he's just always been daddy to me, and I was used to that, but everyone always seemed to know him wherever we go, and they would always say, oh, I loved your dad in this film or that film, and he worked with so many cool artists, or they would say, I love your dad from Fellini, and is it cool how he got to work with Fellini? And we didn't really understand that much until this year. We kind of realized how, I guess, famous he is and how popular he is, and everyone always knew him wherever we went. And this year we're just kind of realizing everything about him.
He has so many friends and a pretty big fan base. Like whenever we would go out just to eat or something, people would be like, oh my God, Peter, how have you been? And it was always so cool to see a bunch of people, and it was always a great way to meet new people, just hanging out with Daddy.
Love you.
I love you too.
For me, acting is a very strange, undefinable art. When I started out acting, I thought I had to act this way or that way. I was very young, 12 or 13, and I realized that I wasn't an actor. What I was, as I started working more, I was a changeling, a chameleon, and I would just become whatever it is that I was doing. That, to me, is the art of acting. Like in painting or coloring, just get out of the way and see what the muse or the genie or whatever you want to call it wants to do through your body or your being.